Live chat back. What's up, everybody? It's Wednesday. Ben and Chad here with you once again. It's the live chat like we always do. Going to spend the next 60 minutes or so taking your questions, comments, and concerns over at the Patreon page. Thanks to everybody who stopped by to help us out with that. Should be a good time, as it always is. Ben, do you have any opening remarks, any opening statements you would like to give before we dive into this?
So there I am this morning. Went and got a haircut, as you'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very clean. Looking good.
Yep. Coming back from the haircut, stop at Rose Hours, local grocery store right down the street here from my house. As I'm getting out of my car and I'm going in, there's a woman sort of pacing around in the parking lot nearby, and it seems like a tense phone call. Like whoever's on the other end, they're not seeing eye to eye on some stuff. But, nobody's yelling or anything from what I could tell. It just seems like maybe we are in some kind of a acrimonious situation somehow. I'm not in there more than 10 minutes, probably less than 10 minutes. I come out of the grocery store and she's screaming into the phone. And the last thing I hear her say is, "Fuck you, then I'm calling the cops," and then hang up. And as Charlie Utter might say, somebody had fucked up in the interval. Because when I went in there, we weren't doing all this. And by the time I come out, we're calling the cops. Like, geez, man, that's the time it takes you to go in there, get a few groceries and come out. The whole situation has deteriorated, unraveled, you might say.
I mean, even though you describe it as only 10 minutes, that still sounds like 10 minutes longer than I would like to be on the phone. So,
True.
Especially having an acrimonious conversation that ends with me screaming that I'm going to call the cops. So, wow, that's sounds like a bad one. Sounds like she caught a bad one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that you also feel like 10 minutes is longer than you want. 10 minutes longer than you want to be on the phone, because every once in a while, or you have one of these friends who is just like a caller. Like I text somebody, be like a question, like, "Oh, what time are we meeting up tonight?" And then the phone rings with them, and I'm just like, "What the fuck is wrong with you?
Did somebody die?" That's my first. When the phone rings, I'm like, "Oh shit! This is either your one phone call from jail or somebody that we know has passed away." Either way, I'm letting it go to voicemail.
Are you on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And I'm your phone a friend. They still do that? I don't know if that reference is timely for our crowd.
Yeah, ain't nothing good happening when the phone rings. And if I get a friend that's a caller, man, I don't mind telling you, I'm going to weed that person out like the UFC weeds out professionally competent managers.
I'll tell you what I do is I screenshot them calling, wait for it to end, and then text them that screenshot and be like, "What the fuck is wrong with you? Calling me like some kind of sociopath."
And then they text back, "This is my one phone call from jail." That lady really did call the cops.
And I tell him, "You really fucked up if you're calling me from jail, because there's not a whole lot I can do." You want to know who's first this week, Chad?
Not really, but you might as well tell me.
Your boy Cranky Foo.
Cranky Foo rolls up in here and he's first. And you know what? If I'm not mistaken, unless I miss my guess, Cranky Foo is going to come loaded with a promo.
Well, you know what? You're not wrong. Cranky Foo begins, "Boy howdy, and there I was, just sitting on my spurs and wondering where in the dickens y'all got to. ... is what the old coots say when they're first, down Texas way where I come up. None of that is true. I grew up by Johnson Space Center, which experiences a much lower than national average incidence of cowboy talk. We did get regular school visits from astronaut dads. So that's nice. Anyhow, seeing as I got here early, please permit me to plug your Patreon. For any sorry suckers who missed it, that first episode of Doing the Damn Thing was downright fucking delightful, insightful, wry discourse that has finally broken free of all its fetters and now roams the American Serengeti, gathering up whatever it damn well pleases. In particular, that free-range discourse has patched two ratty holes in my mental fabric. First, other MMA media had groomed me to believe that quote-unquote interviews are synonymous with a tedious recitation of poorly memorized talking points. So thank y'all for reminding us what a real interview is. Your chat with Dan Brooks was remarkable. Second, y'all MFers also reminded me who Norm Macdonald is. See, I'm frequently preposterously clueless about the popular cultures, so when my wife told me that Norm Macdonald had died, a hazy memory of some dude from Weekend Update surfaced, and I gave her the old Robert De Niro shrug. Turns out I was remembering Kevin Nealon. And I certainly don't wish him dead. But if he did accidentally get himself dead, Robert De Niro shrug? So Jesus Christ, I never thought at the start of this first comment we'd get to a point where somebody expressed indifference as to whether Kevin Nealon lives or dies.
Yeah, things have already gotten very deep.
So now put yourself in my shoes and envision Kevin Nealon's goofy mug as people memorialize Norm, tell anecdotes, repeat punchlines. I've put his name in brackets as a stand-in for that image. Here's me, amazed. Wait, Kevin Nealon was actually super subversive? Hold on, Kevin Nealon got himself fired from SNL because he wouldn't quit it with the O.J. Simpson jokes? No, do you actually mean to tell me that Kevin Nealon was beloved as a comic? But hearing Dan Brooks, I finally said, all right, damn it, what is the uncompromising, edgy Kevin Nealon humor? So I plugged Norm's name into the old Google machine and I'll be damned. Now the real Norm Macdonald stands up. Then I go down the same rabbit hole everyone else did a month ago, laugh myself to tears. And when I say to my wife that night, holy shit, Norm Macdonald is hilarious. She gives me this outraged look and says, yeah, I've been telling you that for a month, but you just kept shrugging and rolling your eyes like Robert De Niro. So Chad, Ben, and Mr. Dan Brooks, as the old cooch would say, thank y'all for learning me what I should have knowed. I think I owe the CME Consulting Service a reality check fee. I hope you'll settle for this heart emoji. And it is, in fact, a heart emoji. And now y'all get back out there and keep doing the damn thing.
Okay. Yeah. See, we're straightening out misconceptions. We're keeping everybody abreast of the situation.
That was a ride, man.
Yeah.
That was
I also appreciate
ride.
Cranky Food showing up to plug the Patreon on the Patreon. So thanks, buddy. Thank you.
Like when you buy the UFC pay-per-view and then you see an ad for that pay-per-view and you're like, but I already bought it. That's how I'm seeing the ad in the first place. I appreciate it. Cody Burnson says, so it is looking like the recent domestic violence issues surrounding Chuck Liddell aren't as bad as we originally thought, at least for Chuck with the charges being dropped. Still not a great situation for the family, but at least it isn't more serious. So update to this situation. Last I heard, no charges filed against Chuck Liddell. He had filed for divorce kind of immediately after putting out this statement saying mental health issues going on with his wife and that he was the victim and not the perpetrator. From what I read online, basically they're saying that I believe like their child had said something about witnessing them pushing each other, that he had marks on her, she didn't have marks on her, and not enough evidence to proceed with the case, so no charges filed there. So true, not as bad as it could have been. And do you think if you're Chuck Liddell, you go, man, this is John Jones's fault? Because
I mean, you got a lot of people you could point fingers at if you were Chuck Liddell. And let's just say at this point, there's some anecdotal evidence to suggest that maybe Chuck Liddell wasn't just bullshitting us with his account of the evening when he got out of jail the morning and put out the statement on his Instagram. But the fact is, we still don't really know what happened. So
right.
No charges for Chuck Liddell. Could be a million reasons why that is the case. But at least for the time being, there is a possibility that maybe Chuck was telling the truth about this stuff.
Yeah, but I guess I'm thinking, like, since it came right after the John Jones thing, people, us included, naturally going to go, oh, here we go. Yeah. Here we go with these MMA fighters and their domestic violence bullshit.
Yeah, there've been a bunch of them right in a row. Like, I don't think anybody can be blamed for assuming that this was just another instance of MMA fighters doing bad stuff in the domestic violence realm, because we've seen so much of this stuff over the last couple of years. This is if Chuck Liddell's version of events is true, which still we don't have any confirmation of that, but if it's true, like that, this is the anomaly then in all of those stories.
It is. Peter Muir says, what do you guys make of Stevie Ray signing with the PFA after his short-lived retirement that in fact turned out to be a cover story? One of neglect from the UFC, it seems, after coming off some high-profile wins and a stacked division. This annoyed me. As a fellow countryman and school friend, I like to see him do well. Is this a case of bad man management from the UFC or his manager? Or has a deal been struck in the interest of the UFC and manager and not always the fighters? Discourse. P.S. Loving the new content on Patreon. Okay, so I don't know if I'm missing the latest on Stevie Ray. The last I heard... let me go ahead and type him into the old Google here. The last I heard, he had come out and basically been like, hey, when I retired, I didn't really want to retire. It was basically like contractual shit with the UFC. Is there new updates on him?
Oh, I don't know. I don't have a Google alert set for Stevie Ray. I have to be honest. I
Yes,
didn't
you
even know
do.
that he had come out and basically said that he was that he did it to get out of his contract. But like, uh, and I mean, I'm these UFC exits are so sticky, man. You got George St. Pierre out here still under contract, but apparently Stevie Ray, maybe he had fought out his entire contract and then retired or something. But or maybe Stevie Ray doesn't register in the same metrics that George St. Pierre does. So the UFC was just like, all right, man, good luck in your future endeavors. Like it's always never quite sure how that plays out.
Okay, this is from MMA Junkie story like a week ago that 1 year after announcing his retirement, he's back and signed with the PFL. The I feel like we talked about this story when it was first happening, that there was a bloody elbow story where he was saying, and I think it was like in August, it was kind of like late summer, and I think maybe actually it was okay. Yeah, it's from a bjpenn.com thing. That's who he was talking with, and he was just talking about how the UFC got him to sign this contract, and then was also like, okay, send us your visa issues, and he was like, but you or send us your visa, and he was like, that I've had visa problems, like you knew that already, like, and then getting told that he's being released, and like there's a whole bunch of weirdness. So I don't know enough about exactly what's going on with him to say exactly what happened there, but it does seem like I was really hoping that maybe George St. Pierre would be the guy to challenge some of the UFC contract provisions just to see if they can hold you indefinitely. And he felt like the guy where he's got the money and he's got the time. He doesn't have to fight. He could just give us an answer, because so much of this stuff seems like the UFC is skating by on contract provisions that might not stand up to a legal challenge, but that have been a bedrock of the way they do business, because fighters just don't have the time and the money to sacrifice in a lengthy court battle to get an answer, to get a firm legal answer on whether you can do this shit or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And, what did Dana White say the last time he mentioned it? They have 700 people under contract. He called
I
them
think
lunatics.
he said lunatics, 700 lunatics.
But the important part here is the number. Like when you got 700 fighters under contract, if that is accurate, like even though you're in the hashtag just some fights era, it's going to be hard to make all of those people feel like things are going well. Like I could totally see how a guy like Stevie Ray, despite the fact he's a pretty good fighter, would slip through the cracks if he had a couple of issues, whether they be injuries or visa problems or what have you. Like it'd be pretty easy to just kind of feel like you had gotten lost in the shuffle and your whole career had kind of been derailed. So now that he's back in the PFL, I feel good for him, man. If that's where he wants to be, like go win $1 million, man, and throw money up in the air like Jason Miller walking out in the hockey mask. Like that would be a feel good story for Stevie Ray. And I also wish that somebody would challenge the UFC contracts. Like, I feel like we've said it a million times, and it's sort of a pipe dream, but I honestly feel like John Jones and Francis Ngannou at this point should just be like, you know what? We're going to have this fight. We're going to have it outside the UFC. Stop us if you can. And we'll, if you do that, we'll countersue you with the argument that our contracts are illegal anyway, and therefore not binding.
They could have themselves a boxing match.
You could
to get the protection of the Ali Act.
Boxing match where takedowns are legal. Can we do that?
I mean, as far as just like forcing some action from the UFC's part, if they just announce we're going to have a boxing match and we both went and got licensed as professional boxers, and then forcing the UFC to try to step in there and stop it, and then let's see if the Ali Act can be brought into play there, it might be the thing you need to incite some action without having to go through the box match. But even if you did go through the boxing match, I don't know. We wouldn't be too mad if that one went down as a boxing match. I'd watch that shit. John Fletcher says, brother, where does Chad's world famous phrase, shall we do it again, brother, come from? And then there are a lot of guesses that like relate to the WWE and Hulk Hogan, maybe even something having to do with Dagestan. The correct answer in the replies here comes from Steven Swartz, who notes, it's nice. What Don Fry said to Gilbert Ivel after Gilbert gouged the shit out of his eyes.
Yep.
Now, this is true. This is from an old Pride fight. Now, If I remember correctly, though, like Gilbert was disqualified for cheating his ass off in a pride fight against Don Fry.
Yeah.
But wasn't he actually finally disqualified for for grabbing the ropes and refusing to let go? Wasn't it not the repeated eye gouges that he was disqualified for?
That could be. That could be. This is also the why I always getting fucked fight, right? Where
Yep.
he says that on the mic, and then like
He seizes the mic to say that.
yeah,
Yes.
he says that, and then he's storming out of the arena, and then Don Fry grabs the mic and he's like, Gilbert, we can do it again, brother.
And
we can do it
says
again.
it through a swollen mask of a face.
Yeah.
Because his eyes have been gouged so thoroughly by Gilbert Eibel's thumbs. Like, basically, it's one of those fights where, oh, no, okay, at least Tapology listed as the loss due to eye gouging at Pride 16 Beasts from the East in 2001. It's Don Fry keeps trying to take him down. They end up in a clinch in the corner on that Pride ring a whole bunch. And he, as he is reaching up to try to get some separation, just keeps sinking his thumb right into Don Fry's eyes, and then also looping his arm over the top rope. And you know how they do in Pride? They just have a whole bunch of like referees at the side of the ring just trying to reach over and like make you stop, like wrench your arm free of the ropes. And Gilbert Eibel just was not having. He was just trying to cheat as many different ways as he could simultaneously in that fight. But Don Fry's iconic offer that we can do it again, brother. And that gravelly ass voice. That's where it comes from. Neil says 7 active fighters are within 4 wins of each other for most all time in the UFC. Donald Cerrone was 23, Jim Miller 22, Andrei Arlovsky 21, John Jones 20, Dustin Poirier 20, RDA 19, and Chucky Olives 19. By the time they hang up their gloves, which do you think will stand atop the list? Is there anyone not listed that you could see having the talent and longevity to get out 25 plus wins at the UFC level? Now, this is something I've been thinking about recently because I wonder, in this era of like the Dana White Contender Series, of the UFC signing these people earlier and earlier in their careers, and basically treating them as the UFC executives used to refer to Conor McGregor as a penny stock. And, you know, we'll just sign a bunch of these people and maybe one of them will hit for us. Do you think that the total number of wins, like that record, will just start to get shattered by people who, you know, maybe they're not all going to turn out to be UFC fighters long-term with great longevity, but in all this Contender Series, like maybe you get one person who you signed them when they had 4 pro fights and then they spend their entire career with you. Like, do you think that that will become more commonplace? Or do you think that somebody who, you know, like a Donald Cerrone or maybe a Dustin Poirier, if he stacks up a few more, like they set that record and it stands for a while?
Yeah, in the interim, like kind of all those younger guys who are already on that list, Poirier and Chucky Olives, you know, it seems like they probably have the best chance to seize the mantle. Although, like we talked about, I think on Monday, it seems like Jim Miller could keep going for a while. As long as he gets advantageous matchups, he could be right there. But I think you got a good point, man. People are getting to the UFC sooner. They're younger. And the schedule means that the UFC wants them to fight more, which is one of the things that we saw play out pretty specifically with Francis Ngannou. Like, the guy won the title in March, and they wanted him to fight again in August to defend the heavyweight title, which is a really short turnaround for the heavyweight title. So, like, yeah, we're getting younger people in, and we're asking them to fight more. You think about a guy, just by way of example, not saying that this is a guy who's gonna, you know, go that route, but Sean O'Malley is 26 and he has 7 wins in the UFC, 6 wins in the UFC, it looks like. So, you know, do the math on that. It seems like as long as he keeps winning, he could get there. And like, he's certainly not alone. I think there's a lot of young talent in the UFC who's going to be fighting frequently, at least, you know, as they get started in their UFC careers. And it's possible that we get to the end of this thing, whatever that may be, with a bunch of guys who have a ton of fights.
Yeah, I mean, or do you see more competition for them at a certain point of like when they fight out contracts? Like, maybe because I wonder how that situation might continue to change over the years if Bellator gets more aggressive about trying to sign some of these people, because we've talked before about how it used to be sort of unheard of that people would fight out their UFC contracts and test free agency, and that if you did, there would be some comeuppance. That if you said to the UFC, no, I'm not going to sign a new deal when I still have 2 fights left on the old deal, and they would say, what? All right, like you want to take us that route? Fine. For these last couple fights, we will try to make sure you lose. We'll try to make sure you look bad, and we'll bury you on the prelims. And they don't really seem to do that so much anymore. Maybe because it's just become more common. And when you got 700 lunatics on the roster, you got your work cut out for you, just keeping everybody busy enough to not be in breach of contract. Like I think that's one of the things I remember doing a story on the Matchmakers before, and not only what they said, but what some managers said, where they're like, there have been instances where we felt like they were pissed off at us and being a little bit like wielding this power they have to sort of punish you. But for the most part, you get the sense that they are just stressed the fuck out with the numbers game of it all, and they don't really have time to be too vindictive, or like that's just not a luxury that they can afford to factor in most of the time.
But yeah, right now it seems like a terribly hard job to be the UFC matchmaker, and whether or not there will be any more competition in the marketplace, I don't know, to be honest with you. Like I was actually thinking this morning, it seems like if you were Bellator and if you were going to make a push at the UFC, if you were going to like try to sign some more talent, the time honestly would be now. Like I can't even remember a time in MMA history when so many people were voicing displeasure with their UFC contracts and how much they get paid. It seems like we're hearing about that more and more publicly right now. The heavyweight champ is unhappy. John Jones was unhappy. He's also on the fence. It seems like we turn around and hear from people all the time. Wasn't Corey Anderson on the MMA Hour saying that he made more in his 2 fights in Bellator?
Right. When you got to think people are hearing that. They hear that and they go,
Yeah. So like there's that. But the problems are, I think, number one, I don't have any idea what Bellator's financial situation is or how much money and capital Viacom is going to make available to them to go out and try to sign these free agents or potential free agents, because I don't know even to this point what kind of position Bellator holds inside the Viacom like family of holdings. Like we don't even know what Viacom wants Bellator to be. Like they would have to give them a bunch more money, it seems like, if they were going to make a play for these big free agents. And the other problem is, like, the UFC just makes sure that a lot of these people never become free agents, man. Like that's just how they work their contracts. Like for every time you want a big fight, they extend you. Like Conor or Dustin Poirier wants the Conor McGregor fight or the Khabib Nurmagomedov fight or whatever it may be. They say, all right, you can have it as long as you sign this 8-fight extension or whatever. That happens all the time. So like there are obstacles to that reality coming true. But I also think, like, it seems like if you are in the free agent business right now and you were Bellator, this would be the time to make a push, man. This would be the time to go after some of these people that maybe you thought were untouchable before.
Okay, since we hear occasional complaints from people that they can't get into live chat thread quick enough to get in the top questions, and then if they feel like they're down there at the bottom, they get ignored. So I'm going to scroll way down here. And I'm going to go with this one from Daniel Schwartz, who says, having just seen Aspen Ladd's corner bordering on abuse last weekend, what are some of your favorite, and in parentheses, Sarah Longo excluded because that's too easy, and least favorite corner jobs that you guys can recall, either in terms of technical advice or just general balls to the wall energy? Thanks. Well, I mean, the Sarah Longo team, they do bring a certain something.
Hall of Fame energy from the corner of the Sarah Longo. Like there are ones that we joke about a lot, like Joe Warren, we talk about a lot on here, telling, who was it? Scott Jorgensen against Dominic Cruz. Yeah. Get your hands on him, Scotty.
Yeah.
Get your hands on him. He's like, man, I'm fucking fighting Dominic Cruz. If I could get my hands on him, I would.
Prime Dominic Cruz.
A well-greased eel out there.
Couldn't even find him that night.
One of my personal favorites that I talk about a lot from way back in the day when Daryl Golar fought Evan Tanner, and his corner kept shouting, punch him in the face, Daryl. Punch him in the face, Daryl. Just like, that's why we're here. Punch him in the face. Punch him in the face, Daryl.
I mean, I think we all remember, didn't Misha Tate tell Brian Caraway once to just cruise?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or was it the other way around? I think it was her telling him, like, just cruise, like, thinking that you're up headed into the last round. And it turned out maybe he was not.
Yeah.
And
then, of course, I mentioned it on Monday, but Greg Jackson telling George St. Pierre that he doesn't want to hear about his groin right now is one of my favorites.
you know, it's always tricky, I guess, because there are times where you hear the corner, like we talked about before, you got to know what your fighter needs. Like, what kind of fighter are they? Are they kind who needs to be yelled at and that will light a fire under them? Are they kind that needs something positive to build on when things aren't going well? Like, do they need gentleness? Do they need, fired up? And that's up to the coach to kind of know that. I remember Robert Follis used to talk a lot about that how it's just a sign of like bad coaches in MMA is that they approach it all the same and that they're the same guy in the corner no matter what. And it's, you got to be what that person needs you to be in the corner. But it's always like a tricky issue to me when you have coaches in the corner and they're trying to tell the fighter whether they think you're up or you're down on the scorecards without fucking things up. Because they know how this game goes. Especially they know when the camera's hovering over their shoulder. They know that people are going to remember this if you give them bad advice here. If you say, we're up, let's just not get knocked out, and it turns out you're not. And trying to guess what some judges are doing, good luck, man. Like, we know how badly that can backfire on you. You never know entirely what they're thinking. And so I always feel like that's such a tricky situation, and yet it's, especially unless we have like open scoring instituted all over the place, it's also such a key part of it. Like, it is the thing that makes the difference between saying like, okay, hey, look, it's a close fight, we need to win this next round, or saying we need to finish. There's no way we win this unless we go out there and we get a finish. But you also don't want to send somebody out there recklessly if they are close on points.
Remember when Tito Ortiz was a coach on The Ultimate Fighter and there were like 2 or 3 fights right in a row where he told someone in the corner to do something and then they went out and did it and immediately won the fight? And for a very, very hot minute, we were all like, oh my God, is Tito Ortiz some kind of like corner coaching savant? And then that quickly gave way to us being like, no, he's just a dummy. I
mean, in fairness, one of the things I really remember about that season was that between Tito Ortiz and, assuming we're thinking about the same one, when Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock were coaches, Tito came off looking like the much better coach.
Yeah.
Ken's team sort of like hated him by the end and felt like he was not an effective coach and that a lot of this stuff was bullshit. And, we used to hear those stories, those blood and guts days at the Lion's Den of just the incredibly grueling physical training that he would put him through, but maybe not the most in-depth technical mind when it came to working with, like, Ken Shamrock seemed like one of those guys where he would be a great coach for Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
But maybe not anybody else.
Yeah. I think when I interviewed Jonathan Snowden about his Shamrock biography, which is up here on the bookshelf behind me.
We can't read the titles from here, but okay.
Maybe you need to get your prescription updated.
That could be.
He told me that like he when he did this biography, like he talked to everyone that Ken Shamrock has ever known, pretty much, and that it wasn't clear at the beginning that Ken Shamrock knew he was going to do that, and that when he like came back to Ken with a bunch of Lions Den guys basically being like, hey, a lot of these Lions Den guys kind of seem like they don't like you, or like even if they do, like it's they respect you, but they're like, he used to kind of beat the shit out of us a lot in training. That was like one of the few times that it seemed like Ken Shamrock was really bothered by something. Like he felt bad, like because he'd be like, oh, those are my friends, like,
you're gonna make me sad.
Yeah,
you're gonna make me sad talking about this shit. Ken Shamrock realizes that maybe they weren't your friends after all. Shit, man. Aruj Islam says it's Fedor fight week. That's in all caps with at least 9 or 10 exclamation points after it. Anyways, how much are we betting on Timothy Johnson?
Now,
I went
the odds on Big Tim.
The odds, there's only a few different sites that seems offering odds on it. According to FanDuel, -106 for Fedor, -116 for Tim Johnson. So
that's garbage.
Some people have it even. Let's see what the Montana Sports Bet app has to say about it. I saw Fedor's comments saying that Tim Johnson was the obvious choice when he was given a choice of like who he wanted to have for his next opponent, and it was like, I don't know, man. I couldn't tell if even Fedor believes that, or if he expects us to believe it. Like,
It looks like
of course, you look at the Bellator roster and who Fedor wants to fight. Tim Johnson. I mean, how do you ignore him? Like, I don't know, man.
it looks like Timothy Johnson is minus 154 at Montana Sports Betting, and Fedor is minus 120. So you're not getting plus money on either of those guys.
Please give me some odds on this fight won't go to the distance. I don't give a shit what those odds are. There's no way this fight goes to the distance, right?
I saw the headline was like MMA fighting headline or something that Fedor. It was like Fedor explains why he didn't want to fight former UFC champion Junior Dos Santos, and I was like muttering under my breath, "Is it because he thought he might lose?" That's one of those things where it's like, if I click on this headline and read the story, will it say it's because he thought he might lose?
Will it just tell me what I already know? Friendly Sparring says, I'm so late, this probably won't make the cut. Oh, this in your face. We're just throwing it in your face right now, Friendly Sparring, by reading this. However, as Dan mentioned on Doing the Damn Thing, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So my question is this. Am I the only one who desperately wants to see Lewis versus Ngannou 2? I'll grant you the first fight was a stinker of all stinkers, a masterpiece of stinkers, if you will, but I maintain it was the perfect storm of Derek's back issues and Ngannou being shell-shocked from his fight with Stipe. I know Derek stumbled against Cyril Gane, but if he earns his way back, or if Francis loses to Cyril, doesn't the second fight make a ton of sense? So, I mean, right now, when with Francis Ngannou as champ and Derek Lewis having just lost the interim fight, doesn't make a ton of sense. But I can grant you, it's not too hard to imagine a scenario, especially if John Jones stays completely out of the picture, where a second fight makes sense. And if you're the UFC, don't you book that one thinking, well, there's no way we could get fucked twice on this. Just no way.
I mean, in a vacuum, the Derek Lewis Francis Ngannou rematch is fine. It probably wouldn't be as bad as the first one if you got these guys in different physical and emotional points of their careers and got them out there to fight. We all know what they both do, and it seems like a very compelling matchup of styles. The problem with it was just like we were juxtaposing that across from the notion that Francis Ngannou could have fought John Jones. That both those guys were like, yes, let's do it, and the UFC was like, how about Derek Lewis? Like, fits better into our budget if it's Derek Lewis instead of John Jones. And we were all basically like, are you joking right now? Is that a joke? But yeah, like as just standalone by itself as a fight, nothing wrong with Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou. But I agree with you. Francis has to get by Cyril Gane, which, there are experts saying that might be a more difficult task than some of us take, to see on the surface. And Derek probably has to get a win or two, and we have to figure out what's going on with John Jones, and then we'll see where we're at.
Don Willis or Wiles, I'm going to say Willis. In light of sad news regarding the death of Justin Thornton post BKFC event, do you feel this is a cautionary tale for this promotion and they're past their prime fighters they recruit? With no other way for many of these athletes to make a living, do you think we'll see more deaths or debilitating injuries, such as we saw with Gary Goodridge? I wonder what will become of these guys in their 50s and 60s if they make it that far. And then adds later, just to add to the thought, BKFC recently had Joe Riggs versus Melvin Gillard in a matchup of over-the-hill fighters who probably aren't going to law school after their fight careers are over. And Melvin got his orbital all broken up in that one. That one looked pretty bad, like right away. I mean, I don't necessarily think that there's anything more dangerous about the bare knuckle aspect of it. Like, to the extent that they might be putting people in trouble, I don't think it's that, honestly. Especially because I know people, like, there's more cosmetic damage, sure. Like, there's more cuts and stuff from the bare knuckle stuff. But we're out here flying, kneeing each other in the fucking skull, kicking each other upside the head with, like, our shins at, like, baseball bats. I don't know how you can look at somebody being punched with a bare fist and be like, that's the thing that is way too dangerous and cannot be allowed. Because you could die way easier for just being picked up and slammed on your skull the way we sometimes see happen in MMA. Like, that shit is scary to me. I think, though, it is the aspect of they want names. The only names really available to them basically through either like contractual availability or that, budgetary concerns are some of these people where they're still in it because they got no other ideas of, like, no other career to transition to. and not necessarily still in it because they want to be or they should be. Like that is the concern. And I think like this particular death, as a lot of people said, and as some of the pro fighters have said, it seemed like it was a matchmaking concern, like more than it was the bare knuckle aspect of it.
Yeah, and that's possible that's true. That sort of like safety issues and matchmaking issues might be the biggest threat to the health and safety of people who are doing the bare knuckle fighting. But like I said, after after it happened, after this guy died, which is obviously a terrible tragedy, I kind of feel like it's over. I kind of feel like bare knuckle boxing is over. Clearly, they're going to try to soldier on. Like they just came to Montana and did the Joe Riggs Melvin Gillard fight a week after that guy's death. It's just like I'm not interested in it anymore, and I have a hard time believing that it's going to really have any staying power as like a promotional thing in combat sports. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I don't know. It just seems like regardless of whether or not it's the bare knuckle aspect of it that is actually the most dangerous part, I just personally feel kind of done with it, and I would be surprised if it's around like 5 years from now.
Tom Hughes notes, random comment, did you know Francis Ngannou is the Lineal Pride FC heavyweight champion? I was bored and curious. Now, I went and just typed this into Google to see what they could tell me about it, and it seems like there was a Reddit thread about this in like 2 years ago, and it says it tracks the heavyweight Pride title as such. Fedor had it, when Pride fell apart, and then he lost to Fabricio Verdum in Strikeforce, so it moved to Fabricio Verdum. He then turned around and lost to Alistair Overeem in that kind of disappointing decision in the Pride heavyweight Grand Prix. Overeem turned around and lost it to Bigfoot Silva. I think we all remember that one. That was a real turn of events. Bigfoot lost it to Cain Velasquez in one of those periods where Cain Velasquez was beating Bigfoot up like once every summer. And then it went back to Fabricio Verdum, who beat Cain Velasquez. And I think we all remember that's where the legend of Sea Level Cain was born in Mexico City. From Verdum to Stipe Miocic, from Stipe to Daniel Cormier, and then from Daniel Cormier back to Stipe. And then we know what happened with Stipe.
Yeah. So a long story short, eventually you get the Lineal Pride Championship in the hands of the UFC heavyweight champion, and it just kind of goes from there.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like if you, most of them do sort of merge with the UFC belts here. So I like when I'm watching like a boxing event, was watching Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, and they're like the lineal heavyweight champion. Am I a mark for feeling like that actually means something? Because that does mean something to me, where you're like, okay, we can trace the lineage of this belt, and if you got to beat the man to be the man, this is the man.
Yeah,
we did the math.
Especially in boxing where it's so fractured that maybe you need an additional signifier to declare who is the actual heavyweight champion that people should pay attention to. Like that, maybe that's what you go with. Like MMA is kind of so under the sway of the UFC, and it's such a strong force in the middle of the industry and like 95% of the market that like, once all of the other titles lineally kind of join up with the UFC, it becomes less interesting to me. That it's just like, oh, well, now whoever is the UFC champion, like, is the lineal champion of all of these promotions that have come before. Like, it would be more interesting if it was like, oh, did you guys know that, Timothy Johnson or like one of these other weird heavyweights was the Lineal Pride heavyweight champion. The fact that the Lineal Pride heavyweight champion is just the UFC heavyweight champion is kind of, okay, I guess.
Yeah. Timothy Hoyer says, cheers, gents. In light of Corey Anderson's recent claim that he made more money in 2 Bellator fights than he did during his entire UFC run, and meanwhile UFC heavyweight champ Francis Ngannou's recent statement that he has to borrow money to live, what do you think the tipping point is for fighters to get fed up with the UFC and move elsewhere in actual meaningful numbers? Is there even one? I realize this isn't entirely about money, but come on. As we've said before, there is also a limit to the number of fighters Bellator could absorb into its roster, just with the number of events it runs and the types of events it runs. Bellator isn't out here doing the thing where we have a main card and then a prelims and they're all established guys. Bellator is doing Scott Coates' old Strikeforce model, where a lot of the prelims, depending on where you go, is made up of local guys who are getting a one fight tryout, basically making like 1,000 to show and 1,000 to win, and they are there to sell tickets to their gym friends and their friends around town. Like that's what they're there for. And maybe if they turn out like if they actually look good, then maybe we keep them around. But a lot of times we don't. And so they're just working a different kind of model, and that roster does not have room for as many people. But I also do wonder, like, like as we said before, there's got to be some people who hear Corey Anderson saying that stuff and go, is he just saying stuff? Is it actually true? Could life really be better over there? But then they also factor in, hey, look, when I was training hitting heavy bags, I was thinking of myself as UFC champion. Like when people ask what I do, I don't want to have to say, the UFC, okay, it's like that, but it's this different thing. Like the UFC brand power, I think still does hold a lot of sway in fighters' minds. The question is, I think, as we've seen, people get later in their careers, and that means less to them than the zeros on the paycheck, rightfully so.
Yeah, and like we mentioned before, the UFC has a bunch of mechanisms built into how its contracts work that prevent guys from becoming free agents. They have the champions clause that literally exists so that you can't leave the UFC while you're the champion. And so you got those obstacles as well. And I think while there are multiple suitors for anyone who becomes a free agent from the UFC, while you have PFL and Bellator, and you're going to have the World Fight League, and you have ONE FC, it helps soften the blow if a couple of high-level fighters leave, but they go to different competing organizations. Then it's not like anybody's really absorbing that power. I feel like to really have a tipping point, you would have to have a lot of those free agents bound for the same destination. And whether that becomes Bellator or not, I don't think there's any way to know. I think we found out recently, if I'm not mistaken, just in one of these articles that John Nash has written, that Bellator already pays a significantly higher percentage of its revenue to its fighters. I want to say that it's
lower
between
revenue, but
40 and 50%. It's just a much smaller pie to divide up. So I think Bellator would have to get a big influx of cash, is my assumption, if it was going to go try to make a play for about a lot of high level free agents. And then, like I said, you got the thing where it's like, oh, well, a lot of those guys just like can't get out of their UFC contracts unless they specifically make a point to like, I'm going to fight this out and not take an extension and not going to get the fights I want, probably going to get tougher opponents. And then I'll be a quote unquote free agent for whatever that means.
Sunny Weathers says, now that the CME is covering all of the universe, is it time to change the name, but never the initials? Co-Main Empire, or my personal favorite, Co-Main Enterprises? Also, can the CME consulting firm reach out to Dustin Poirier with the suggestion that if Conor wants a rematch, Conor first has to rematch Aldo? Aldo gets the rematch he needs, and depending on how the fight with Chucky Olives goes, it could be a title eliminator. Now, first of all, I want to say, I love everything about the idea of setting up these kinds of stipulations. So forget fucking trying to get somebody to tattoo that they love you on their body, on their person, in order to get another fight with you. Tell them they have to go fight and maybe not even defeat. Just they have to go fight this other person. Like name that person and name your reason. And be like, all right, I think it was bullshit. He ran from that rematch. He got lucky with that one punch of 13 seconds. I want to see it again. I'm going to be front row. I'm going to have my popcorn. The camera will pan to me with that big ass thing of popcorn sitting there. He does that, whichever way it goes, then I'll give him his fight. That'd be awesome. I'm totally fucking into it.
We could call it Dustin Poirier Promotions, where he's like, you know what? I got the belt. I'm going to start booking these fights. Conor McGregor against Jose Aldo.
Boom. Do it. I love it. I love everything about it. Sean Singletary says, 8 MMA journalists saunter into a cage. Ariel Helwani, Brett Okamoto, Mark Raimondi, Luke Thomas, Ben Folks, Chad Dundas, Sean Al-Shadi, Chuck Mindenhall. 8 enter, 1 leaves. Who is emerging? Now, there's a whole lot of fun speculation, let's say, in the replies here. And it gets... people get really pretty deep into imagined pro wrestling scenarios, including one that ends with us teaming up to eliminate everybody. And then we're fighting back to back and we bump into each other, turn around with cock fists and realize that it's just us left. A lot of fun stuff being imagined here. But frankly, Luke Thomas beats everybody because he is an enormous man.
Yeah, that would have to be like an Andre the Giant type situation where everybody gets together and throws him out of the ring in the battle royal. It would have to be like that. Otherwise, I don't think we would have much chance.
And you know what? We'll believe it or not, that scenario is more or less imagined in these replies. So, okay, Ryan Busatil says, hey.
Hey.
He says, I think Connor asked the Italian DJ, do you want to go to a party? The DJ said, what party? Connor had answered, the fist party. It all makes sense. Now,
finally it makes sense.
I can't remember if I saw it here somewhere in the comments, but the theory that I heard that makes the most sense, frankly, was that, you know, Connor is out there. He's maybe on some substances that are messing with his cognition a little bit. He asked the guy, "Do you want to go to a party with me?" And in the time between when he asks and when the guy says, "Yeah, let's go," Connor forgets that he has asked.
Mm-hmm.
And what he hears is the guy saying, "Let's go," and he's like, then his blood is up.
Yeah, maybe Frankie Fats agreed to go to the party too emphatically, too much enthusiasm, and Connor got his wires crossed.
I mean, I feel like somebody was kind of joking and kind of not, but I mean, it's not that hard to, like, especially if we're trying to imagine the theory that you know, a guy is doing something irrational. What could be in his mind the rational explanation for it? I feel like that one kind of checks out for me on a couple levels. Here's one from Scott Slater who says, "Sigh, why do I even try? Oh well, on to my question." In your face, Scott Slater, because we're reading the question now. Given that we're squarely in the just some fights era, why are we upset that the UFC has switched to giving us banger pay-per-views every 2 to 4 months while supplying us with meh fights basically every weekend? This is kind of the point I was making on Monday. Isn't that the WWF? Yeah, I'm that old. I still say WWF, not WWE model. Shouldn't we be somewhat happy with that? Weekly free-ish fights and then pay-per-view cards with big-name fights and or fighters. Is it because the UFC isn't using those weekly cards to create and build storylines? Because if that's our only complaints, we should just accept this new reality and enjoy it. Now, I think that there's a lot to be said for this viewpoint. Look, we were talking about it before. I'm not going to complain if the shit that you ask for premium prices for is better, and the thing that suffers is the just some fights part. Because those were already feeling kind of skippable, man. Like, those are already like, let me check back in Sunday morning if I have any remotely anything else interesting to do on Saturday, and I'll figure out what happened because it's not that important. And let's make these pay-per-view events feel special from top to bottom. Like, I'm totally with that model, but I do think the downside is, remember how back when we had a pretty typical schedule with Spike TV in like the mid 2000s, after the Ultimate Fighter was first starting to be a thing, and the UFC used a pretty clear Ultimate Fighter to Wednesday night Spike TV fight nights to pay-per-view event pipeline. And you could see people graduating through those ranks. The guys like Kenny Florian and Chris Lieben, Diego Sanchez, those guys where they come up through one thing, you see them in some of these free fight night events, and then after a few of those, they're into the pay-per-view, and that's how it funnels people into that premium portion of the audience, because they're invested at that point. They followed these people along, and now they are willing to follow them to the pay-per-view model. Like, I think that there's something to be said for that. And you do kind of lose that if all the fight nights are, you know, kind of meh and people get used to skipping them. Yeah.
I do think that what Scott Slater lays out here and what you talked about on Monday is probably the healthiest mindset to have in the just some fights era. The problem is, and maybe this is changing now, but there was a long time during the Fox era and maybe into the beginning of the UFC era, and maybe you can tell me if you think that this still exists or if this has also fallen by the wayside, but for a long time, the UFC was trying to pretend like this shit was all the same.
Yeah.
That like they weren't making any value judgments between various cards. And for a while, and I think specifically in the Fox era, there was still an expectation that if you were a real fan of this shit, you would still watch all of it. That like people put words to that. And that expectation persisted long after the actual product didn't warrant it any longer. Now, maybe that's changed now. Maybe we no longer look at these fight night events as absolute must watch. Hey, if you're a real fan, you got to sit here and watch the prelims on the undercard of Aspen Ladd versus Norma Dumont. Maybe we're not doing that anymore. And if that's true, then I think you have maybe you don't have a bad landscape. For me, it's like, as an incredibly old person who has been watching this sport for a long time, it's hard for me to wrap my mind around the reality that the UFC has figured out a way to make more money by offering an objectively worse product. Like that will never stop bothering me. So we, stop trying to talk me out of it, I guess is what I'm saying. But like, I will also concede that, like, number one, stacked pay-per-views, ain't nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And I agree that I think that you guys have identified the healthiest psychological story to tell yourself.
Well, we're about 50 minutes in. You know what time it is.
It's Tracy time.
Tracy Dickinson writes, after the UFC informed the fighters about the new COVID policy for international fighters going to the US needing to be vaccinated, I wondered how huge of an impact that would potentially have on fights/matchups. It seems like a good portion of the fighting community may be not necessarily pro-vaccination. But no worries, guys. Dana has assured us that it looks like Fight Island is about to become a popular place to visit, where both vaccinated and non-vaccinated are free to come out of the mouth of the King Cobra Snake water slide. Whee! Abu Dhabi seemed pretty strict with COVID restrictions before the vaccine became available. Do you suppose they'll care if fighters are vaccinated and spoil Dana's plans? Or will he be free to continue JSF with no interruption? And there's some speculation here about how Abu Dhabi would approach that, if they would foot the bill the same way they did before to just keep everybody segregated and away from the general population where they might spread COVID. It is interesting, though, because I saw some different responses right off the bat where, the fighters who are really anti-vax are going to be mad about it. Even if it doesn't affect them, some of them are mad about it. Even though they're already Americans who don't have the travel issue. Some of them are already mad about it. But I also saw some people being like, all right, I just booked my appointment. I'll go get the vaccine. And you're like, okay, maybe this is what it takes. And then also people pointing out, depending on what country you come from, you might not have as many vaccine options as we do. Like, we kind of take it for granted and have for some time now in the United States, where we're like, look, man, you walk into Walgreens and get that shit today if you want it. They are dying to give it to you. And we just don't have enough people willing to take it. But in other places, they're still sitting around being like, please give me an opportunity to take it. And I will, but I have not had that opportunity yet. So it could be potentially very different for you depending on where you are. But it does seem interesting that the UFC's first response is first send out a letter that says, like, look, here's what's happening with the United States government. This isn't us doing this to you. This is what the U.S. policy is. And then Dana White's immediate answer is like, don't worry, we'll get you all to Abu Dhabi so that you don't have to get this vaccine.
Yeah, forever? Like, is that his plan forever? Forever and ever, amen? He's going to keep bringing people over to Abu Dhabi so they don't have to get the vaccine? That seems like a pain in the ass if you are a fight promoter. I would just get the damn vaccine, man. Just get it. Just get it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. Works. Safe.
It is.
Healthy. Effective.
Mm-hmm.
Just get it. Just get the damn vaccine. Just get it.
Get the damn vaccine. William Danforth says, lucky number 87. You need to do another Christmas Carol thing. I love that. Maybe animate that one. Halloween Story might be cool. Have you ever wrote anything on a psychedelic? Anything good? What about Stephen King Blackout style? Man, okay, I read Stephen King's book on writing. The book is about writing. It's also called On Writing. It's good. It's really worth reading. And he talks about, some of his substance abuse issues in it and claims that he does not remember writing Cujo, I think it is, at all because of drinking and coke. Just doesn't remember doing it. What a fucking flex on all the other fiction writers out there, that not only has he written so many goddamn books and one of the most successful fiction writers of all time, but he's like, oh, that one that was super successful is also made into a movie and a bunch of people really like it. I don't even remember doing it. I take your word for it because my name's on it, but no idea.
Yeah, that is pretty good. Showing out, popping his collar. Yeah, not really. Like, when I write, I mostly do it sober. So,
yeah, I mean, I have done some writing, like, maybe under the influence of a gummy or so. But what I find I do then is like, I'd like to think that it frees you up to just go and explore places you wouldn't normally go. Instead, it makes me just like really slowly and obsessively craft sentences until I get maybe 2 or 3 of them done, and they're not even that good by the end because you've just been fucking with them too much. So it doesn't work as well as you think.
I don't need anyone to increase my ability to just sit there and stare at one sentence. That's pretty much what I do anyway. I also like that people imagine a world inside the Co-Main Event podcast where we have the ability and the power to just animate something. Just like, oh, yeah, we'll make a Christmas special, and Ben will draw the animation for it.
Yeah.
He knows how to do that.
I could do like a flip book.
No, you couldn't.
Listen, I do a fair amount of drawing at the kitchen table with my daughters. So
flip book where a stick figure walks out with a Santa hat on, maybe.
Listen, okay, I'm about to make you feel like a fool. You wait.
Yeah, show me some of these flip books you've got. Show me your flip book collection.
Son of a bitch. Okay, here's one from McGregor's Dealer. He tried to post this earlier. Something happened to the first comment, I think. I don't know how. It says deleted on air, but we did not delete it, so I don't know what happened. But he reposted it here. What's the crackin', lads? Dark question from me this week, so apologies in advance. So settle in, Chad. On the proper, when discussing Jim West's cornering of Aspen Ladd, you mentioned that it is shockingly common to have coaches that are in a relationship with their female fighter. But the Ladd-West relationship is common in another way. West started training Ladd when she was in her early teens and went on to have a sexual relationship with her. Whenever Antonina Shevchenko loses, we see memes about how Pavel Fedotov trained one sister and groomed the other. But should we be having a more serious discussion about how prevalent these kinds of relationships are in the sport? According to Pat Barry, he started dating Rose Namajunas in 2009. There's a link to a Bleacher Report story about it. That would make him 31 and her 17. If not outright illegal, it's certainly creepy. It's even more alarming when it's the fighter's coach, who can hold a huge amount of emotional power over their fighter, who can often be quite vulnerable. It's hard to know if it's something we should be discussing. At this point, the fighters are consenting adults, and I normally hate when you have all these men feeling like it's their purview to dissect the personal lives of female athletes. But I'm also uncomfortable that MMA culture has normalized coaches fostering these relationships with young girls. In the 70s, it was commonplace for rock stars to openly joke about how they chased jailbait. Understandably, history has not looked favorably on how accepting everybody was of this behavior. In the decades to come, will history look at our current MMA culture with similar unkindness?
It's a big question, and it is kind of like disturbing how frequently with these relationships seem to come around. And like in some ways, I guess it's not that big of a surprise that you would have these various relationships, and that physical attraction or some manner of romance would spring up between people when you are engaged in this thing, where I think a real bond is built between a lot of different people, and you end up coming to feel very close to a lot of the people that you do this stuff with. On a case-by-case basis, it feels real weird to me to try to parse out what's appropriate and what's not, since we don't know the individual people involved. And like, obviously there's some stuff where it's like, if it's like legally a crime, or you just have like a disturbing age disparity between the two people, or if one person is married and like they are stepping out on their spouse, then I think we can pretty vehemently say that stuff's probably not okay. But I think you get into a gray area real fast when you don't know the specific people involved, or what their relationships were, or what kind of people they are. But I agree that it is probably something that deserves more scrutiny, just because of how frequently it happens. And I guess just as a matter of factual information, like there's some disagreement between Pat Barry and Rose Namajunas about when their relationship started. Like, I know that Pat Barry has said that thing that they started dating in 2009, which Rose Namajunas would be 17, and she has said that they didn't start dating till much later, a couple years later, when she was like 19 or 20. Obviously, he's still much older than her, and maybe Rose Namajunas just has better sense than Pat Barry to like say publicly that they didn't start dating until this specific time. But like, we don't honestly know the truth. And like the Rose Namajunas Pat Barry one is there's more layers to it, essentially, because that dude has pretty much like devoted his entire professional life to Rose Namajunas' success at this point. And clearly, like, we don't know what goes on behind the scenes or like what the dynamic of their relationship is like or how they are at home or whatever. But it's like, I don't know what, like, did Pat Barry work a conniving and evil plan to become Rose Namajunas' husband, and then he would spend the rest of his life reveling in her success and making sure that she becomes champion and does a good job? Because, like, I don't know, like, that seems like a weird thing for us to think. So just very strange.
I agree that it is sometimes when you think about this stuff, it can start to feel icky. Like, okay, you met this person when they walked into your gym and you were this authority figure and they were like a 15-year-old. And then a few years later, you guys are in a relationship. Like, that seems weird. And also seems like you guys need to be aware of like this power dynamic that you were setting up and how that could get weird in an ongoing way. But at the same time, I do think you have to say, like, these are consenting adults at this point, and if female fighters often end up in relationships with their coaches, then we have to respect that that's a choice that they're making, and that they're capable of making a different choice if they want to, and allow them the agency of getting to decide that for themselves. I do think though that some of those, when you look back on it, we might start to view them differently, maybe once we get a fuller picture of what's going on there. But I don't know. I do think I can understand why people look at it and think like, okay, this makes me uncomfortable to think about how this situation looks. But also, when they're adults, everybody gets to decide for themselves what kind of life they want to live, Couple more lightning round here before we get out. Josh Montgomery says, sitting here on my day off, watching Friday the 13th 4 with Corey Feldman and Crispin Glover, I feel my phone vibrate. I click the link to the chat 31 seconds after it posts, and I'm 9th. You people are fucking savages. Anyways, since Ben ain't in the Discord breaking bread with us common folk in the movie club discussion thread, I'll ask here for you guys to hit us with some of your favorite movies from the horror genre. Cheers. Okay, Chad, I was trying to watch a couple horror movies, it being the spooky month and all. I watched Host, or The Host, not the one made by the Korean director who also made like Snowpiercer and stuff like that. The recent one that came out sort of during the pandemic, and it's like an hour long, and it's these people. It's the entire thing looks like a Zoom chat, basically.
Oh yeah. I heard about this when it came out. People say it's real good.
It is good, but it's like a 60-minute horror film. And I loved it. Like, it didn't feel rushed. It felt like it still had a pretty typical like structure. You wouldn't want to sit with the Zoom format for much longer than 60 minutes. It felt like a film version of a novella. I was like, I hope that this is a genre, or that's like just like a category that takes off in more than the horror genre, because I feel like you could do something there.
Yeah. There has been a lot of ranking and lists going on over at the Discord, people chiming in with their favorite shows, their favorite movies, their favorite books, stuff like that. We might steal it. We might just flat steal this idea and start doing some ranked lists over on Doing the Damn Thing, our very definitive and perfect and very serious lists of our favorite stuff that no one should quibble or argue with at all, because clearly we would never make a mistake in our rankings. So yeah, we might do that starting this week. Actually, I think we're going to do a ranked list on Do the Damn Thing. We got a good idea from our guy Josh Carey, the guy who recently got the Dundasso tattoo, sent us a good idea for a ranked list that kind of fits with the theme of this week's Doing the Damn Thing. So we're going to do that over there. And to specifically answer the question, a lot of people know that I'm not a big horror movie guy around here, but it seems like I've made that pretty clear. But like, I like any horror movie that I feel like it's doing something a little bit more profound. You know what I mean? Or is like a legitimately good movie. Like Jaws would be the example I would throw out, which I guess is sort of like a creature movie, horror movie, but also just good. Like they just did a good job. And so those are the ones that kind of elevate the genre for me. Or
say something like Hereditary, which I think you would really enjoy.
No one is saying that. You're the only one who's saying that. Everyone else is just saying it's real scary.
It is real scary. It's one of the only horror movies in recent memory as an adult where I had to remind myself as I went to sleep that it's only a movie.
See, I'm out. I am out of that.
Silver Shark says, did episode 1 of Doing the Damn Thing accidentally do too much and out Sir Nigel's true identity as writer-commentator Dan Brooks? His vocal timbre and Fry sounded identical to me. Theory number 2, Sir Nigel is and has been method preparing for his Oscar bait role as Dan Brooks in the upcoming biopic Ventriloquizical.
You know, people keep saying this, that Dan Brooks sounds like Sir Nigel, but I don't hear it.
I don't hear it. You know, I just don't hear it.
Yeah.
But, hey, you know, whatever. Just a couple more here. Justin Manning says, opportunities abound these days for aging and retired UFC fighters. Bisping, Felder, and Joe Ban retired with the security of broadcasting gigs. Current fighters in their 30s like Angela Hill, Anthony Smith, and Bilal Muhammad have analyst jobs. JDS and Masvidal are rocking AEW. Vitor Anderson and Tyron got sweet boxing paydays. I've loved seeing this all unfold, but how many Triller, AEW, and ESPN spots are left? Will the next round of retirees have any of these job possibilities? Love you, dudes. It's true that you could conceivably stay in a commentator role for a whole lot longer than you could as a pro fighter.
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot. Like, there just aren't that many jobs. Not everybody can have one of those jobs, man. So it's not. I don't think that this is like the answer to the question of what are these, like, how do we care for these fighters after they retire, or what enables these people to get out before they have suffered long-term damage, et cetera, et cetera. Like, and right now it's kind of pretty much on you, the individual fighter, to have that plan and have the wherewithal and frankly to make the money where you can save for the future and have a different career that you want to segue into and feel like you're going to be financially secure. It's a very fraught situation right now. And to harken back to the earlier question about, you know, what the future is going to be like for these guys, like, I think that there's some mounting evidence now to suggest that people, at least who come out of that Gary Goodridge era, the Chuck Liddell era, like, probably not super bright for a lot of those guys as they get older. I think a lot of those people sustained damage that is going to make things more difficult for them than for a normal person. And how that extends into the modern times, we don't know yet. Like, there's probably still like some terrible dark futures for guys who are out here doing this.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's not just the brain stuff that we think about. It's all the body stuff and, you know, guys having joints replaced. And look at Stephan Bonner. Things have not been going great for him. As he's talked about some injuries from both MMA and a little bit of pro wrestling. And yeah, that stuff can mess with you going forward. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Andrew Millington, who's out here tendering his resignation from MMA, but says he'll still be around the CME properties and everything, but just the recent spate of abhorrent crimes and the homogenized UFC product of today has broken him. So we do hope we still see Andrew Millington around here. Although Brandon Boyd notes, when you come back, we get to call you noob for no less than 1 year. That seems more than fair, I have to say. Okay, here's interesting. We'll do 2 more here. Ross Miller says, gentlemen, Big Fran's comments contradicted the UFC's narrative that he was vacationing and not able to fight, necessitating the interim fight. And that narrative was parroted on ESPN. I know ESPN is not the Times or the Journal, but for a network with such clout, shouldn't they have at least tried to set up a call with Francis to confirm his globetrotting and get a picture of him on a beach, Hawaiian shirt open, sunscreen-covered nose, drinking a frozen colada out of a gallon-sized jug? I know ESPN is a business partner of the UFC's, but this seems irresponsible. Bundle that with ESPN being in the same network as ABC, Hulu, Disney, and all the other networks under their umbrellas, and the landscape seems ripe to promote only the stories the UFC says and leave no room for coverage of other organizations or even stories that might make the UFC look bad. This feels a little dystopian. Am I wrong? Now, it is interesting and has struck me before how when we're watching a UFC pay-per-view, right, that in the United States, you need to have ESPN Plus to be able to buy the pay-per-view. And then you buy it and you see like ESPN employees like Brett Okamoto like appearing on the broadcast. And if you're watching it, are you wondering, am I watching an ESPN product or am I watching a UFC product? And then you have this kind of stuff where it's like they're putting together their reel to tell the story a certain way, even if that story is misrepresenting the facts, like with the Francis Ngannou thing. And are you, the viewer, supposed to see this as, here is ESPN's broadcast journalism telling me what this is? Or is this part of the UFC product and that the UFC can just bullshit at times to tell whatever's the best story that helps sell the stuff? Like, that does get you into a tricky gray area, I think.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a sketchy situation, and it's certainly not just the UFC and ESPN. There are big money partnerships between broadcast platforms and sports going back a long time now, and pretty much all throughout professional sports. And anytime you have that relationship, it's going to get a little bit touchy because, like, if you are like ABC or CBS or NBC or whatever, and you have a deal with the NFL, like, are you really going to report a lot of stories that make the NFL mad, considering how lucrative those deals are for you? Like, it's a bigger question sometimes than I think we think. And with ESPN and the UFC, it's a particularly like visible situation for us, obviously, because we watch the sport a lot, and we know that left to its own designs, the UFC would have a lot of topics that it wouldn't want to discuss, like either with the media or on its own broadcast or whatever. And like, I think even though it's a sketchy situation, the balancing act occurs at the street level, essentially, that like, despite the fact that ESPN has this relationship with the UFC, I don't think that many of the people who work at ESPN who would be in charge of reporting the stories or coming up with the story ideas feel particularly indebted to the UFC itself. But the question then becomes, if those people have story ideas or things that they think that they should be investigated that could be touchy for the UFC, does that make it all the way up the chain to management? And at some point, does someone say, no, we're not going to do that? And like,
yeah, I mean, think about something like that Spencer Fisher story that Stephen Morocco did, and that was one of the the most important stories of the last year, and that he spent years just trying to get that story. If somebody from ESPN gets that story and finds out, hey, the UFC has been keeping Spencer Fisher on the payroll, or was keeping Spencer Fisher on the payroll, knowing that he had some brain trauma issues, and they were kind of using that to keep him quiet about it. Do you think that they go forward with that story, knowing that the UFC could be very pissed off, knowing that its own broadcast partner is the one breaking a story like that?
Yeah, it's impossible to know. And that, I guess that's why it's important to have independent sources out there, independent platforms out there to employ guys like Stephen Morocco,
discourse,
where the discourse can be unfettered.
All right, last one here from Derek Maldonado, who says, if you had to fight one of the people, or really entities, as we'll see when we get into this list, that Conor has battled on the streets, who would you pick? Pizza DJ? Old man at bar? A bus? Miami cell phones? Or the idea of water shortage itself? I don't know if this is supposed to be water safety.
Water safety, yeah.
You know what? I don't want to punch that old man for several reasons, one of which, man, he took it pretty well. A bus seems kind of intimidating, but I don't know. I feel like if you are also outside the Fontainebleau in Miami at like 4 o'clock in the morning with your cell phone out, I could probably think of a good reason to punch you. So, I'm going to take that one.
With the exception of the bus, I think I could take any of these fuckers.
Man, that old Irish guy.
Line them up, folks.
Grizzled.
As long as I don't have my broken toe. Oh, I got my broken toe. I can't, you know what? I can't fight any of these people, actually. I got to take 4 to 6 weeks to rehab that. Otherwise, hold me back. Hold me back.
You're going to fuck around, swing on Francesco Faccinetti or whatever his name is. And he's going to come at you like a goddamn human tornado.
I mean, from the sound of it, I'm going to be watching out for his wife throwing a chop block while I'm not looking.
They're quite a team.
Yeah. All right, that's going to do it for this week's live chat. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for supplying us with your questions, comments, and concerns. We couldn't do it without you, quite literally. We are back tomorrow for Doing the Damn Thing. Bunch of fun stuff on the slate for that. And, of course, Friday again for the Power Hour, heading into this weekend where what's going on? What's going on this weekend, folks? What's
Paulo
happening?
Costa and Marvin Vettori.
Right. And then Marvin Vettori is out here saying Paulo Costa wants to do it at 205. Says he's
are we getting Snacks Costa?
Having some
is that the version we're getting?
We might be getting Snacks Costa out there. Gonna have to wait and see. In any case, thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you Friday. Well, we'll see you tomorrow if you're a $10 patron. Still getting used to this doing the damn thing schedule, but we'll see you then. Thanks for listening. We're done.